Yes, hello everybody, and welcome as I kill that, as we kill the music. Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow. We took a break last week, but we're back again. We took a break because we were all busy one way or another with the Grand Prix and other things. But we're going to be talking about that this weekend, our impressions of the Australian Formula One Grand Prix at Albert Park, the return of Formula One to Grand Prix City, Melbourne. We weren't all there, but Pete was there, and Pete will give us a first-hand impression of what he thought. It seemed from the outside, looking at from where I was sitting at home, it seemed to go very, very well. But joining us this week on the program to get everybody together, we've got Chris Ritchie, we've got Craig Doc Gladigo, and also, as I said, we've got Peter Johnson as well. G'day guys, how are we?
All right,
good evening, Brett. Pretty good.
So good to see you. Let's open up the messages and have a look at there. Say Russell Clark. G'day Russell, how are you? Also Dave Howard. Yes, I hope we've recovered from the Grand Prix. Well, I think Pete was the only one who had to recover from the Grand Prix. Although from the message you sent to me, I think it was quite the recovery, Pete.
It was, yes. Yeah.
And once again, Virtual R. G'day, Roy. How are you? Roy, of course, from Online Invent, our sponsor on In Pit Lane on Channel 31, and we appreciate that. Who I think was also at the Grand Prix, and we'll be talking about some of his impressions as well. So we've got somebody's got an open speaker on there somewhere by the sound of it.
Yeah, no, my earplugs are playing up.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so we have sorted that out. Okay, well let's start with you. You were the man who was on the ground for all 4 days. First of all, the results of in terms of how the event was. It's funny. Autosport have published an article this week saying basically that the return of the Grand Prix to Melbourne and Albert Park, that this was the tonic Formula One needed. This was the first meeting, as I said, pretty much the first meeting since the whole crisis began, and appropriately enough or ironically enough with the Australian Grand Prix. They said this was the first Grand Prix that they really felt like a Grand Prix. From your point of view, being there for the 4 days, what were your overall impressions?
It definitely felt like a Grand Prix. What was scary is Ferrari, the pace of the Ferrari. That's the furthest in front that they've been since the beginning of the season. And in 2020, the S5000's got a run, and they didn't have mufflers, but they did this time, so that was interesting. But it felt like a Grand Prix, and there was a very good atmosphere, and yeah.
So what was it? Did you notice any difference? I mean, like, Dave Still was talking about in the lead up to the event. I mean, the changes that they'd made to the circuit. I mean, from where you were sitting, I mean, you're basically in pretty much the same similar position every year. But I mean, did you notice a lot of changes to not just the track itself, but also around the track and getting in and getting out, and the atmosphere around the joint?
I think they had fewer food and bar facilities. Like they had the precincts, and I was in the Great Ocean Road precinct, but I really, frankly, couldn't see any resemblance to the Great Ocean Road at all. So, but I think they were caught on the hop because restrictions were eased after they installed those precincts, and they said you could move around freely, but it was too late to sort of add anything more.
Oh, I think you might be off the. They had the surf and turf burger at one of the stands, didn't they? There, that counts as being part of the Ocean Road, doesn't it? If you just name a burger after the area, that's sometimes all they do. So it could have been the surf and turf burger.
Well, that was one of the things they did this year. They really tried to tie it in with the regions. I mean, I saw on the map they had the Great Ocean Road area, they had a Mornington Peninsula area. So they really tried to sort of tie it in with tourism in general in Victoria. As Paul Van Der Acker is saying, he was marshalling flag at turn 5 on Thursday, and that was interesting. They made some changes to the techno barrier after Thursday, because there were a few people went in pretty hard. But overall, I think it would appear that the modifications that they made, let's face it, it didn't give us an absolute killer race. I mean, it wasn't as if there was the race itself was full of passing or anything, but it seemed to be from the feedback from not just the Formula One guys, but also also all the support categories as well, including the supercars. Everybody seemed to be pretty happy with what they saw there. So and certainly the lap times were much quicker.
Strategically, I think it was more challenging for the teams, so they had to maybe work it. They always got their plan A and plan B, but they had to work out a little bit more of a strategy as options, because of obviously it was an unknown entity at the track. I mean, the lap times were going to be less because of the layout of the track had changed, and also the surface had been relaid. It's the first time since 1990 odd that they've spent the big bucks on the tar. So there was a few variables there for them to encounter, and I think that probably made it like if you're even a Formula One follower in a small capacity, you were anticipating what if, and the other thing was obviously too, some of the teams didn't nail their pit stops under 3 seconds to start off with. It was they had to get well into the race before they were all actually getting on, and so it was different what ifs all the way through to anticipate.
I think the interesting thing. Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
There were overtaking manoeuvres in the midfield. There were quite a few. So,
yeah, I think with the modifications of the track, as Paul is saying, that the Tech Pro barrier softened the blow, but the thing is it needed to be rebuilt every time, and I think that's part of the problem with those sort of barriers, is that they do a fabulous job, but it really does. If cars go in hard and they damage that barrier, then the barrier, there is a time factor involved in having to rebuild that particular area of the track. So they made a few. I think they moved the Tech Pro barrier itself back a little bit, or forward or something. Paul would know. So, but they did move that.
What was your impression, Richie, on the silver screen in your lounge room? What do you think?
I wasn't watching it.
Okay.
Sorry.
You didn't see it at all?
I did not see one bit of it.
Oh, okay. There you go. So what was taking up your weekend? Was
a few other things.
Okay.
A trip to Peter Mac.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Fair enough then.
No, well, I should have had it. Should have had it on there for a start. I mean,
I should have overruled the remote control in the waiting room if you're in one or something like that. But I think they probably got it right with the support categories too. So that was great. I mean, it was controversial to start off with when they announced it a while ago that they were going to put S5000s and they could overshadow them and this and that otherwise. But if you get a record crowd of 419,100 and odd people going along over the 4 days, if they broke the all-time record, it was pretty much what you've got it right. You've got a record crowd for whatever reason.
Pete, did it seem that crowded to you?
It did it at the bars and the food outlets. You had to queue more than I've noticed in the past for food and drinks and whatever, but you could move fairly freely around the precinct.
It certainly looked good on television, and I must say, from watching it on television, and I watched it free to air, on 10. I've got free to air television gets an awful lot of criticism over the way they cover these things, and Channel 10 particularly over the past few years that it was covering it, got a lot of bad press, and justifiably so. I think this year was their best coverage ever. They had a lot of new people on. They did a good job. I think they got the balance right between the fluffy celebrity cross-promotion stuff and the fashions on the field and all that nonsense. But when they were talking the racing, they were talking the racing. There was good commentary in the...
They had really good two experts too. One obviously that's an Aussie that helps and people can relate to him. But also, TC has been doing part of the Channel 10 coverage and obviously worldwide accreditation for years and years and years. And he's a familiar face on Formula One. I mean, he's always been an all-rounder at TC, and he's absolutely fantastic as well too.
I think it was good. My only criticism of the commentary is all that I think Crailsey did a great job. He's very professional. It wasn't someone people were saying great job for his first Grand Prix. It wasn't technically his first call of a Grand Prix. As far as I know, probably his first call of a Grand Prix actually took place right here in this particular room when he called the Macau Grand Prix for in pit lane many years ago. So we'll claim that. We'll claim his if he goes on to fame and fortune as a Grand Prix commentator, we'll claim it.
He didn't interrupt his social media platform and put that in and just throw that one under the bus and see if he responded to it. You could have thrown that one in if you wanted to, but yeah. So, but the other thing is too with MW on with him as well, and he was doing the expert commentary. There was three of them on, but mainly dominated by the two of them because Chad was down doing the pits and didn't have to give him much because there wasn't much action other than just the retirement through some mechanical problems from a couple of cars or a light mistake at the start. But MW, when he was on, he was very light-hearted the way he explained things and didn't complicate it, did it in pretty much straightforward terms, did it very concise and very sharp and quick. And some of his wording was actually good. He'd throw the odd joke in before because obviously he's been there, done that, and extremely relaxed about it.
My only complaint about this was my only complaint about about the whole coverage of the weekend, and we love Mark. Mark's been a great friend of the show over the years, and he's a terrific bloke. And Mark, if you're watching, mate, really enjoyed the commentary, mate. But mate, if you say mate too much, if you were playing the Mark Webber drinking game, have a drink every time Mark Webber said mate, you'd have been absolutely comatose by about lap 7.
Well, it's his he is a mate, and it's probably his go-to word like the rest of us. I suppose if you're overseas, you got to make sure you sound like you feel like you're at home, and he's probably just because as we all know,
he does use it a lot in real. He wasn't putting it on or anything. He does talk like that in real life. But I mean that's.
Well, one of the
It got
funny
very,
things,
for me, it got very annoying with, well, mate. Well, I'll tell you what, mate, there's a really good lap there, mate, by Clerc there, mate, and it's good, yeah, so,
well, look
yeah,
here, mate. One of the funniest things he said at the end of it, and I think it might have been toward, I can't remember what stage anyway. Someone must have said to him about, oh, why don't you jump in the car? He was talking about an occasion over the weekend earlier that where he was catching up with one of the drivers, and we all know he's got a great relationship with Alonso and a couple other the fellas, and they must. He said jokingly, they jokingly said to, oh well, you know how to drive these things. Why don't you jump in yourself and do it? Like you're welcome, hop in the car yourself. And he goes, no. I'm 10 kilos heavier than what I used to be when I used to drive these things. And you took a look at him when he was doing it at the on course interviews after the race is finished, or any sort of footage of all the weekends previous to it. So you're only going on memory and thinking, Jesus, he's got 10 kilos on. You can't see bloody 1 centimetre of where's he put it all. So he might have been exaggerating a little bit, but his commentary was very lighthearted. There was no lulls, or there was no highs and lows in the race to a certain extent. But he was very casual and very jokingly like in his commentary, saying, "Oh yeah, oh there's a bit of open room there. Oh that was a little bit of a bit of extra mayo on top of that one and stuff like that." And it wasn't that real straightforward, down the line, boring technical commentary where it has to be pitch perfect that can put you into even more of a coma, Brett. So then that he actually was very jovial and funny about it, and lighthearted.
yeah,
Just,
Pete?
sorry, just replying to Russell Clark. Not only were the supercars louder than the Formula Ones, but so were the S5000s, even with mufflers. But also, I read somewhere, I can't remember who said it in the comments down the bottom. I read somewhere earlier in the year that the FIA weren't going to be using jets in the pre-race anymore because they want to improve their carbon footprint. So
I heard that. That's why I was surprised, because people said the roulettes had turned up, and I thought that I thought that they'd pretty much sort of got rid of all the aircraft, all of the military stuff out of it completely as well, because there was an element of that about political correctness about it. It has to be said that the FA18 and similar things that have been there in the past, when we had some of the I think they were the FA16s from America, because they were here for the Avalon Air Show. They are just they were amazing, and I like the days of the F111 flyover and fuel dump at the IndyCar Grand Prix at Surfers Paradise was just used to be, that was a highlight. What amazing
There's
machines
been many
they
a
are.
time when the flight commander or anyone has decided that they're up in Darwin. Would you like to fly the FA18 Hornet down to Victoria? It only take you 15 minutes, half an hour to fly down there and just do a few flybys. They've jumped at the chance, even from Darwin, to fly down for a bit of fun, because they just shoot down there at above everything else in commercial airline space, and to come over, drop a bit of fuel as well too, spread their wings a little bit, and then have a cruise back up to Darwin in 5 minutes. So the FA18s have always been excitement plus as well too.
Yeah, that's as Paul said. That's what I thought. It was all military displays, except for display teams like the Red Arrow. So the Red Arrows will do stuff, and I imagine in America you've got the mob that I forget the name of them now, but they're very famous. The Blue Angels, I think it is.
Cue the American national anthem, please.
No. Every time I think of them, all I can think of is Van Halen and Dreams.
Oh, Dreams.
That's what those.
Not jumping.
That's there. G'day, Mad Cow Mark is joining us as well. G'day, Mark. How are you? Andrew Collins pointing out, disappointing no V10 two-seater. The alarm clock, as they called it, the V10 alarm clock of a morning. But That really does show. Speaking of the V10s,
No one gave Paul. No one gave Paul a call and said, "Can we get
It's come to the end of its life.
yeah, it's pretty much. But where all the V10s were, if you wanted to see and hear V10s, have a look at the live stream, and it's still up on YouTube. Have a look at the live stream from the Goodwood members meeting last week, where they had about 14 or 15 V10 Formula One cars. They weren't going all that fast, to be admittedly, but they still sounded so much better
Hey,
than
go
the
back
current
up a step.
Formula
You guys
One
said coming
cars.
to the end of its life. Has it got an expiry date? What's it? Is it someone put used by or something like that? Why?
Well,
This is one of.
Well, this is one of the problems they've got with carbon fibre chassis. This is,
Yeah.
they've got to be they don't know how long they can't sort of crack test them in the traditional method that they used to with with aluminium monocoques and things like that. So they've got to do a lot of replacements and basically rebuild it. And I think it was just a money thing, and in terms of getting it.
Paul's just got on display and said, now has he?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know in terms of where they made the money from or who owned that, but I know that they
Paul
did say in
himself,
advance.
Paul
A lot
owned
of composite materials go soft before they
Paul,
crack.
yeah,
Before they
exactly.
crack, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Paul Stoddard still owns it, I think, from recollection. But anyway, so
He still owns it, but it's
yeah. Oh well, okay, but I'm sure. I mean, you don't have to go screaming around at 200 kilometre an hour. You could just give it a bit of a flick around at 60 to 100, and not necessarily put any pressure on it. That's all I'm thinking. It's just.
But anyway, let's let's go on to get onto the race itself. Pretty much a dominant performance by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. As you said, Pete. I mean, it was. It looked for a while that Max Verstappen, might give him some sort of a challenge over the course of the road. But yet again, this has got to be so worrying for Max and for Red Bull for the second race this season, in this short season already. A mechanical problem left him at the side of the track in a DNF, so he's fallen back in the pack, and because of that, just by sheer consistency and reliability, the car that everyone's saying is just not competitive this year and out of the loop is lying second in the championship at the moment. But it's not Lewis. It's George Russell. George is ahead of Lewis at the moment. But I mean, should we just hand the championship to Leclerc now?
I think it's a bit soon to be doing that. But interestingly enough, when I was there, normally in previous years, we've got the build-up in the pits, when they do the warm-up coming around to the grid and all that. We get all that coverage on the big screens and the commentators, but we got some disc jockeys. So unbeknownst to us in the stands, they're actually putting Max Verstappen's car back together again frantically after discovering a fluid leak. So I think it might have stemmed from that.
Yeah, I saw them working on. I mean, we saw that on the. We did see that on the Channel 10 and on the World Feed coverage that they were doing something, but they didn't know exactly. But they were obviously concerned about something before the race. So that was one thing that did get a lot of criticism. The DJs, doing the music, did get a lot of criticism from a lot of people in the lead up to the race. But so that was. That was good. But yeah, certainly Ferrari, doing very well. Sainz didn't have a particularly good weekend as well, but certainly
Just
George
want to
Russell
comment
had
on
a
that.
good one.
On that, Sainz has had not a very good start to the season. Is probably the easiest way to explain it. But you've got to look at Sainz last year, and look, he said he wasn't well, I think, on Friday or Saturday or after whatever it was, and just needed he didn't do a bad interview with Formula One, but he was tired or something like that, had an upset stomach or something like that, so he just needed a good night's sleep. That was the Friday going into the Saturday. Saints was so because I actually watched the interview with Carlos. But what goes back to the comment that I noticed what someone made in the day or two afterwards was everyone's forgotten, and this obviously relates to where Charles ended up with his first three races. Carlos Sainz did finished every single Grand Prix last year. He did not have any reliability problems whatsoever. Generally speaking, he did not have a DNF last year. So
he's very sympathetic on his car, and particularly his tyres as well. I mean, he's a
he's
very, very reliable driver, and he will. And if it turns out that it's going to be that typical Ferrari thing where we have a very definite number one and a very definite number two, he's going to be in that sort of Rubens Barrichello tradition of being a very, very good number two.
And it'll just, as it just obviously seals. One thing you can say is you might as well hand the Constructors' Championship to him at the start right now, and maybe not necessarily the Drivers' Championship by the end of the year, but Constructors, once they get Carlos reliably out there week after week again, it's going to look good for him. So, you've got to think the Red Bulls are going to be probably maybe relinquishing any development at the moment just to make sure that car week in, week out is going to be out there to give Max the chance to be able to go head to head with Charles, because he's got his tail up in the air at the moment, and he's going to be just full of self-confidence, and he's openly said that he's not saying that I've got the championship, the trophy in my sights at the end of the year yet. But I have got confidence in the car week after week that I can push myself and the vehicle to the nth degree.
I think they're all going to be very, very glad to get back to Europe for the next round at Imola, and I can just imagine the crowd that are going to be there. I mean, the Tifosi, it's just going to be. If we thought it was crazy and there was a big crowd at Albert Park, I think the crowd that are going to turn up at Imola when you've got a Ferrari and a Ferrari driver leading the World Championship.
That's a good segue. That's a good segue, Brett. Who just out of curiosity, who runs the circuit over there, Imola? Anyone we might have heard on the last day or two? No? You don't know. You guys don't know who's president over there of Imola? Who runs the show by any chance, you guys?
No.
No idea.
Giancarlo Minardi runs the show over there. It's his circuit. That's why he's in the news the last 24 hours.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I thought you were leading up to there, Brett. He runs the show over there. I've seen a detailed interview of him today, though, that's all. So, very controversial. Go, Pete.
And again, unbeknownst to us in the stands, they had to swap Carlos Sainz's steering wheel, and the reason he went off in the Grand Prix, in the race, was because he had issues with the steering wheel. So
yeah, he said he had problems with that all the way through, and as has been pointed out by Roy, I mean, everybody who started on that hard tyre just really never came through. I mean, it was quite warm. That we were so lucky with the weather. We really were. When you consider what it could have been. I mean, when we did the interview with David Croft, and Crofty said, what's the weather going to be like? As I said, it could have been, what it turned out to be, which was pretty good weather. Nice, a few clouds, but mostly sunny day. In the low 20s. It was a lovely day to go motor racing, but it could have been sort of a southerly buster coming up from Antarctica and 12 degrees and drizzling for 4 days. It would have been absolutely miserable. So we were very, very lucky there.
Well, the only comment I heard about the weather related and cars related was, I think Websy said, Mark said when they were going out in free practice 1, free practice 2, and they're qualifying, etc., Q1, 2, 3, that sort of stuff, that they'd be taking note of if there was a few knots going through and what direction it was, and also in the lovely, great debut of the Carrera Cups at the new Porsches out there as well, though too.
They looked good, didn't they? The racing was good. They looked good. They sounded good. Unfortunately for our guest this week on the show, Nick McBride, things didn't go. Things didn't go according to plan. I mean, it wasn't the best of weekends for Nick, but Aaron Love did a fabulous job, and Aaron is now heading over, and I think it's even this weekend. He's going to be this weekend I think it's the opening round of the Carrera Cup France. I know Formula 4 is running this weekend, which means that our mate Hugh Barter should be in action. So good luck to Hugh once again. But yeah, I think that Aaron will be doing the French Carrera Cup Championship, which is good. So he just shot out. He looked like he was going to sort of wrap up the weekend and get the 4 straight, but in the
He decided
end,
to build sandcastles at the end with a bit of help.
yeah, well, he had a coming together sort of with Luke Youlden, and so a couple of experienced drivers there, but he ended up in the gravel, and unfortunately that was his his chance of a clean sweep. But it was a
Thanks,
good thing.
David.
Henry Jones took his first win in the Carrera Cup, and Max Vidot ended up winning the weekend overall. So it was good racing. Those cars look really good. They sound good. It was a big field, plenty of action. So yeah, we look forward to seeing that for the rest of the.
And those couple of comments we've just saw, I was about to say, Roy just mentioned he struggled on the first few laps with grip and the chicane and low grip. He made a comment just before Dave Howard, and Dave Howard was relating to what Pete just said. For anyone who's listening to one of our podcasts right now, Saints used 3 steering wheels over the weekend, so he obviously had some electrical gremlins. And a lot of the drivers struggled not just with the new cars and the technology that they've had to use. They also struggled in the first couple of free practices. And turn 3, a bit hard. Turn 11 was a bit hard to negotiate at times as well too. They struggled a bit. Doesn't matter how much simulator work before you fly over here. You've got to still get in the car and put the thing around the track, especially with the new design of the cars.
Yeah, well, it was, but it was a good weekend. But McLaren they were interesting. I thought the fact that it was probably a much better performance than they were expecting. I mean, they certainly weren't up at the front, and they weren't even sort of they certainly weren't up to speed even perhaps with Mercedes, but they got a little bit closer, and they finished sort of just outside of the top 4. So well done to Daniel Ricciardo. Probably could have, if he had been an absolute mongrel about it, he probably could have taken that position off of his teammate, because Lando was apparently struggling with a few problems, but the team asked him to sort of hang off the back of him, and they said, we want to get this car home, so please don't put pressure on Lando. And if you listen to the radio with Daniel is like, yeah, fair enough. It's just I'll do the. So he did the right thing, and he just.
They both did to a certain extent.
Yeah, yep. So they got the cars home, and so they'll be very happy that it went better for them. But the team that had probably the worst weekend was Aston Martin. Poor Sebastian Vettel. I mean, he's had such a terrible start to the year. He'd only had basically a handful of laps in these new cars. He's missed the first couple of rounds. He's come over here. He's had nothing but trouble. And it wasn't just the Formula One car that had a problem, because there's been massive criticism about the Aston Martin safety car, because of the fact that it just wasn't going fast enough, and people were complaining from back in the pack, saying, "Look, they've got to drive. Mylander's got to drive that car faster." And I think it was Max Verstappen who said, "Nah, listen, I'm behind that car. I'm seeing if I was driving that, it wouldn't be going any faster with the way that's handling. Not probably a good." Not probably a good advertisement for that particular Aston Martin as a safety car.
Just looking up the detailed information on it now. And to quote, of the first thing that's popped up is Verstappen called it a turtle. There you go.
Yes.
Yes, speed. And I'll just find out the details of the car to find which one it was. It was the 4-litre twin turbo V8 Vantage.
Which is a lovely looking car, and it makes it a very good GT3 car. So I'm surprised that it was, if it was that slow.
When they were doing practice runs with the safety cars and the medical cars, I did actually hear a screech of brakes, which I don't normally hear when when they're
Yeah,
on pace.
that's what basically Mylander was saying. He said I couldn't push it any faster. He said and be sure that I wasn't going to spin. So he couldn't push it much faster. So it was obviously not handling all that well. But
Quote for quote of Max, there is so little grip, and also the safety car was driving so slow. It was like a turtle. Unbelievable, he fumed. And he wrote, and he followed it up with, to drive 140 kilometers an hour on the back straight, there was not a damaged car. So I don't understand why we have to drive so slowly. We have to investigate.
well, lots of investigations.
Because the and then he quoted, for sure the Mercedes safety car is faster because of the extra aero, because this Aston Martin is really slow. It definitely needs more grip because our tyres were stone cold. So obviously they had
Well, that's the problem. I mean, like I mean that's the problem. They've got to keep them going at a speed where they can keep those tyres up and hot. So
yep. So
yeah, it's like as Roy was saying, they should be doing some upgrade. I'm sure they will. I'm sure that now once they've got it back to Europe,
he did sympathise with the drivers. To be honest, I wanted to complain, but then I checked how much the safety car was sliding in the corner. I don't think there was anything more that he could give, so I didn't want to put too much pressure.
Yeah, exactly. So
there you go. And then of course George has chimed in. Good on you,
yes.
George has just been thrown a little smoky in, which is probably completely unwarranted, but he just had to, just throw a hammer at the whole conversation. Whereas it says, sorry, there was a bit more that said, third place driver George Russell quipped, "We don't have an issue with the Mercedes AMG safety car." Good on you, George.
Well, as people say, I mean, that's got a bit more aero on it. It's more of a racing car. So I think that probably, I think that I'm sure that they will take it back and they'll do some.
It's been critically judged as the Merc would have been about 5 seconds quicker, which would have got some more heat into their tyres by the look of it.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, it's funny.
Yep.
There you go. Anyway, you just mentioned about Sebastian Vettel. So we had two segues. We had the owner or the guy that runs over the Imola next race where the F1's going to be, and also Seb's come up for a fair bit of worldwide criticism today.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As I said, he's had a bad run. I mean, he couldn't be blamed for any of the mechanical problems that the car had. I mean, he made a. It's obviously, I mean, new track, new car. He hasn't had many laps. Well, the thing is obviously an absolute dog of a car. That's a team that's gone really badly backwards by the look of it. So especially at Albert Park, just didn't like the Albert Park circuit at all. So. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. I mean, Sebastian Vettel is still a really good driver, and that all this nonsense about retire. They're very quick to try and recover. To try and retire any driver who's sort of over 25, who has a sort of who has one or two bad rides. I mean, it's they're very quick to say retire, but.
Giancarlo Minardi's called for Sebastian Vettel's retirement. It's been taken out of and I do encourage people not to just to look at the headlines in the mainstream media, to look at the whole article or look at the whole podcast that Giancarlo mentioned, because he does have a fair bit of credibility in the industry. He runs racetracks. He has raced Formula One himself and has been a team owner. In fact, he owned the Minardi team before Paul Stoddard owned it, which gave Mark Webber his break many, many moons ago. But he has been around. He is well respected within the Formula One industry, and he has said that. And I don't think the way he was phrased, he was trying to be controversial, because he was asked his opinion on a lot of drivers and a lot about the sport and a lot about tracks, and it was a fairly lengthy interview. So, and I'm sure he doesn't want to be, he's just giving his opinion on where things are at, and he doesn't pull any punches, but at least he's not dancing around questions and being boring or sitting on the fence. He's actually asked questions and he's giving his own opinion on it. So, I think that's good. Credible to the guy.
Well, as we move off of Albert Park, it was a very successful. It was very successful, and who knows? Perhaps this is. I mean, it's obviously a rumor at the moment, but as Andrew is saying, the rumor is that the Victorian government have signed an extension to keep the Grand Prix in Melbourne beyond 2025. Waiting for the right time to announce it, perhaps. And obviously, I mean, we've got an election coming up in Victoria as well as the federal election, so they might be sort of putting that might be in the kit bag to sort of be trotted out in the run up to the next state election. That'd be fantastic because it'll be interesting to see next year because there was a lot of criticism from teams and drivers, from media, from just about everybody about the fact that it was the start of the year, the fact that it wasn't the first Grand Prix of the year, the fact that there was there was a gap between the previous Grand Prix and this one, because people were saying, well, they really didn't have enough time to go home. Some people came straight here, and that's okay for the drivers and people who could come here and have a bit of a holiday could, sit on a Queensland island or something, or and play tourist for a week or so. But the teams had a lot of work to do, and there wasn't enough time. And I think it was actually Sebastian Vettel himself who said, if it's not going to be the first Grand Prix of the year, and we can see, there are reasons why it perhaps shouldn't be. At least let's have it sort of, let's have those 3 or 4 in a row, or at least pair it with something else. And it could next year or the year after, it could be with a revived Chinese Grand Prix, because that was obviously the way it ran in the. That's the way it ran in the past.
Cotton socks. I think what they just make at the start of the year, and what they all can do, is they can come over for a week or two beforehand, and they all secretly love coming to Australia because they openly say it anyway, but they also like the Australian holiday that they can have a week or two beforehand. Because
I think if you put it to a vote, they'd be saying, I mean, pretty much everybody would be saying they would like it to be like Adelaide. They would like it to be the last Grand Prix of the year, because that was the ideal solution for a lot of people, because they'd come down here, the weather was good, they could stay for another week or two. There was plenty of time to get everything. There was no rush to get everything madly back. They could have a week or so off. So
everyone except for Valtteri. Valtteri still wants it to be the first one.
Yeah,
because he was over here for a good. Valtteri was over here for a good stint at the start of the year for many months and weeks, and people didn't even realise he was here.
Yeah, that's because he's married to an Australian.
Yeah, because he's going out with a South Australian triathlete.
In the past, it has been paired at the start of the year with either Malaysia or China. So,
yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, if they came here if they could come here and then go straight from there and sort of work their way. But at the moment, the problem is because of the way it works, they're frittering all over the world. I mean, they started off okay. The first 2 rounds made sense. They were close together. It even makes sense even to come to Australia. But now they're going to Italy for a round, and then they're going to America, and then they're going, back somewhere else. Then in the middle of June, they pop off to Canada for 1 week, and then back to Europe again. They're they're not working in terms of logistics. They're not thinking about this. But
look what we've gone through lately. I mean, just be grateful we've actually got a Grand Prix back this year. I think we just should be. I am just grateful, thankful, blessed, whatever you name it. We've got a Grand Prix here this year. It wasn't cancelled. We had no other reason to. So, if they can't make a little bit of sacrifice and just jump around and just for the year, get it sorted out next year. Things will be back to normal. I reckon should just be grateful. People are, in this world just so self-entitled these days. And I think they should be happy that we actually had it this year. And that proves we had a record crowd. So,
it was good. So, but anyway, let's move on. We're running out of time, and we'll talk that. And coming up, very very big weekend coming up this weekend of motorsport. Over the Easter break here here in Australia. I mean, starting tomorrow, of course, Good Friday. If you're in Melbourne, of course, or even if you're outside of Melbourne, remember the Royal Children's Hospital Good Friday appeal. That sort of gets a bit lost nowadays with everything else that's happening. But of course, absolutely huge. So if you haven't put your hand in your pocket yet, make sure you do that. But also, obviously at Bathurst, the Bathurst 6 hour is coming up, and unfortunately, our recent guest on the program, Barry Rogers, was talking about the Mustang that they were building up for Marcus Ambrose and George Badecki. Well, it was today announced that car will not be taking part in the race. They've said that they've got a major an electrical problem and a systems problem somewhere that they just simply cannot find, and they've just said there's no point in starting it. We don't know. We know what it is, we know what it's good, but we can't find it, we can't figure it out, we can't cure it in time, so they've withdrawn that car.
Had a spy at the track last weekend where they were testing it. It apparently spent most of the time in the paddock in the pits with a laptop hooked up to it, trying to work out what the gremlin was. They got it up and running at the end of it for about 2 laps, I heard, and it sounded magnificent for about 2 laps, and then it got put away again. So they obviously weren't able to nut out to get it back to its finest form. So
unfortunately, unlike the Bathurst 12 hour, which is going to be seen on free-to-air television, there'll be no free-to-air coverage, and it won't even be on KO as well for everybody who subscribes to either KO or Foxtel in order to get their Formula One and their supercars. It will be on Stan. So if you really, really, really want to see but you can if you haven't subscribed to Stan in the past or done the trial, there is a free trial available. I'm sort of keeping my free trial up my sleeve for Le Mans because they're also covering, of course, the World Endurance Championship. So
2 weeks.
That will be
2 weeks, isn't it? 2-week trial, Brett.
I think it's 1 week actually.
Only 1 week trial, so you'll have to strategically place that right within the amount of by the hour, wouldn't you, to get that done? So. Just quickly, MotoGP, I'll spend about 30 seconds a minute on that. It was on last weekend. Good race by Jack Miller. Had a cracking qualifying with most. Actually, there was 5 Ducatis in the front 2 rows, so they were pretty dominant at the track. Jack got the whole shot off the start line. Great start. Led the race for about a lap until Bastianini grabbed him, and then was able to sit with him for a good chunk of the race, probably about 2/3, and unfortunately with a few laps to go, relinquished that second place and then dropped to 3rd, just got pipped for 3rd a lap or 2 before the end as well, though, too. So well done, Thriller Miller. It's fantastic to see that you stayed on the back of the bike and got the best out of it for the weekend and got on the podium and got some points. Bagnaia, it was really disappointing. He struggled all weekend, and he and the team are still trying to put their finger on exactly why they couldn't get the bike set up the way he felt confident with it. Marc Marquez made a quick comeback. Didn't feature much in the footage. I was watching the race, the replay the day after. I wasn't able to do it. I've had a heavy week of work due to not being on in pit lane. Sorry, Brett. I apologise. Just been snowed in with work this week, but hopefully we'll get back to normal in 2 weeks' time, which I'm sure you'll explain in a second. So, yeah, well done, Jack. And I think Remy's carrying an injury, Gardner, in Moto 2 at the moment. And he has put out to the world that it may take up to halfway through the season before he's 100% again, even if he is racing. So that's just a quick wrap-up of MotoGP stuff. You're on mute, Brett.
It's interesting that Jack's come out today and pointed out that, the daggers are out, the knives are out for Jack and his position in the factory team. But he said today that he would be happy to go back to the satellite team, go back to Premac, and race there if he could stay there. He doesn't. He feels he doesn't need to be in the factory team. I mean, and they're a very fast team and very successful team as well. So
the bike's 95, 90, 99%, 100 factory spec most of the time on the hand-me-downs these days anyway.
So he was very keen to do that. Apart from Bathurst this week, now as I said, with the Bathurst 6 hour running for production cars, it's a very big field. So if you can get the opportunity to watch, I'm sure it'll be a very entertaining race. But also up there, TCR is running as well, and unfortunately the global catastrophe that dare not speak its name has reared its ugly head. Both Shane Van Gisbergen and Fabian Coulthard are out for the weekend in their respective cars and categories as a result of COVID. So they're not racing this weekend. I think Tim Slade is replacing Fabian Coulthard. And just gone out of my head right now as to who's replacing Van Gisbergen. It's another one of the supercar drivers. Pete, do you know who's?
Super two.
I can't remember.
I'm the same. I've had a blank as well. I'm sure somebody will know as well. So that'll be there. So a big field of TCR cars, a good field in the Trans Am series as well, and that series is just growing and growing. And added to that, Shane Van Gisbergen is driving everything because apart from, we know that he's driving supercars, he's done some rallying. Now he's also announced that he's going to, or hopes to be, getting a drive in Rally New Zealand, a round of the World Rally Championship this year, and he's hoping to drive in that as well. He's got a drive lined up finally for the Le Mans 24-hour race, but he's also driving a Trans Am car as well. He had a bit of a look around and saw them and went, hey, these things look like fun. So I really love that about Giz. I think that's fantastic. He's an old-fashioned, he's raced sprint cars and he's raced all sorts of things. Speaking of sprint cars, this is the biggest weekend of the local sprint car season coming up. The annual Easter Trail is on tomorrow night. If you're in Melbourne and you can get down there, I'm sure it'll be an absolute packed house. Avalon Raceway, the traditional Good Friday opening to that Easter Sprint Trail. Always wanted to sort of, just follow that trail for, and document that and sort of do a doco on that, but you've sort of never had the time or the money to do it. But it would be a lot of fun, I think, because a lot of people do that. But yes, they'll be running. They'll be running to, as I said, the Easter line. They'll be running at Mount Gambier on Saturday night. That's a great, and then they'll be back at Warrnambool on Sunday as well, which is another great track. So that's the traditional Easter Sprint Car Trail.
And Bairnsdale's on too, which is another option for them as well too. They run this weekend as well. So that's some local speedway happening as well. But speaking of sprint cars, in a couple of weeks' time on In Pit Lane, we've got a fascinating sprint car yarn which we're going to tell you about. Somebody got in touch with me just recently and said, "Hey, you might be interested in this story." And I've got to get in touch and sort of sort it all out. But a bit of a sort of a bit of an adventure involving sprint cars and local sprint cars and racing in America and all sorts of things. So that's just
coming
an
up in a
update
couple of
on
years.
for our podcast listeners. The Shane Van Gisbergen obviously scenario is the Bathurst 6 hour. He was running with Rob Rubies and Shane Smolin for this weekend. Unfortunately, they've found a Walkinshaw Andretti United great replacement.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
it's the Chocolate Labs co-driver. So the Chocolate Labs owner, a guy knows how to steer a bit. A guy called Nick Perkat's running instead. So he'll be more than decent in replacement.
Okay, so that's great to great to see that that's coming up this weekend as well, and so there's certainly plenty on. There'll be stuff on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel as well. We had Goodwood last week. If you had the opportunity to see Goodwood, absolutely insane racing. I don't know what it is about, but when you get a whole bunch of recently retired and even not retired stars from the British Touring Car Championship and ex-Formula One drivers, ex-Le Mans champions and all that, and you put them into historic touring cars, it's insane. So if you haven't seen it and if you want to have a really good way to relax tomorrow, if there's nothing else on, go onto YouTube, flick onto last week's live stream from the Goodwood members meeting. Some great racing, some fabulous racing on two wheels and four. So that was great, including they had at night they had a Group C, a race into the twilight. Well, it wasn't a race, it was a run, basically, but they had a whole bunch of sort of classic Group C Le Mans cars racing, sort of running into the twilight and with the lights on and all that. It was fabulous. Fabulous stuff. That's a fabulous meeting.
Just before we go off that subject, for quick sprint racing and a bit of fun, it may not have as high a profile as Goodwood, but it is local and it is in Victoria, and we covered it this year, and we can't wait to get back down there. This afternoon it was announced that Geelong Revive will be on for a second time this year. They were hoping that we would be able to get back down there for the event, which is traditionally in late November. They had it earlier this year, which we covered. Have a look on YouTube on In Pit Lane for that. Brett and I got down there and had lots of fun that day. We did a Nick McBride and dropped into the local servo and got our iced coffee on the morning as we went through. Not in the Porsche that Nick did, but hopefully he might be able to join us down there later on the year. And you never know, Brett. We might actually try and get a Ducati that's hanging around at the back of this in the paddock out here and take it down there, and might even be able to do an in-pit lane special on a motorbike down there as well too.
You never know. We'll have to see. Unfortunately, once again, it's going to go back and clash with Highland Magic again, which it always does. And as I said, that's the reason we haven't covered it for the past few years, because we've always been down at Highland Magic. But so unfortunately, that's going to happen. But yes, it was a very successful meeting, and it's great to know that that's going to be back as well. Also, more two-wheel news from Paul. The Australian Superbike Series had to cancel the Simmons Plains round, and the Tailem Bend round will need to move due to the Adelaide 500. So that'll annoy Sam even more. Next round is at Wakefield Park in a couple of weekends' time. So the Australian Superbike Championship is very, very well supported, very professional. It's world standard stuff. So good luck. And the World Superbikes are back as well. They raced last weekend as well, I believe.
And stay tuned. Keep an eye on this. We'll see what happens. It was an article came out last week as well too. And obviously there's a controversy with Sandown and obviously Podium 1. We're going to have a complex out here in Pakenham and McGregor Road. Everyone's trying to say, why don't we revive Calder Park? Well, there's talking about another, actually spending a few $1 million on building another, whether it ever happens or not. Probably Brett's hoping one of these gets built in his lifetime. Out in the western suburbs, a multi-million-dollar complex to support similar motor racing. So I don't know whether there's going to be any truth to that or whatever it will happen. But I
have been in the 26 years of In Pit Lane, and even before, I have been to so many sort of off the record briefings and so many meetings with councils and politicians and all sorts of people regarding tracks at Melton, Bacchus Marsh, Avalon, Geelong, and out in Corio, right throughout that area, up north a bit, out towards up the Hume Highway, in that area. I've heard all sorts of places over there, and none of them have come to pass. Speaking of Calder Park, unfortunately, probably bad news in a way, on the Parked Up podcast, Mark Fogarty caught up with Rodney Jane, and Rodney is very, very hard to catch up with, let me tell you, and get anything. But
he did race the first time on the weekend. He
did, and that's the reason. Yeah, and that's the only reason Fogarty was able to catch up with him. He managed to sort of to bottle him up and say. Corner him and say, okay, what the hell's going on with Calder Park? Essentially, I mean, reading between the lines, it does come down to money. He has basically said that no, Calder Park is not for sale. Adelaide International Raceway is not for sale. He has every intention of the two venues being improved and opening up to racing again. As he said, he would love to have motorsport there. He said, but motorsport have got to find some dollars. So basically, he's not going unless he gets the money, and it's basically what I've heard in terms of the drag racing and all the rest of it. Rodney is saying that the place is there, but I'm not spending the money on it. If you want to race you spend the money.
You have to invest in me.
Yeah.
There you go. You did say the operative word before, tracks in the last 26 plus years. Well, the only one I've seen that developed is the at least we'll get a rail link between Southern Cross Station and Tullamarine Airport eventually. There's some tracks that have actually gone.
Yeah, eventually.
We've
Yeah.
got, it is being built. That will be built, fortunately.
I think Chris and I are both sort of sitting here now and going, in our lifetime.
Like the railway to Doncaster.
The railway to Roval.
They are getting the tracks built. It is actually coming. That one is actually commissioned and is going to happen. They're acquiring land already, but at least you'll be able to get go to the Macau Grand Prix. You'll be able to get to the airport quickly.
Do us a favour if it ever does open. Just carry my ashes, for a ride, just so I can say I've been on it.
Your ashes, if I have a little urn of it, will be a pride of place in my. If I have that, I'll be keeping your ashes, and I will take them anywhere in the world you want them to be spread for you. There you go.
Well, there you go. I think I think somewhere in Club X Cinema or somewhere is probably appropriate. So.
I'll put them in. I'll spike someone's drink with them then.
Yeah, that'd be probably more appropriate. Yeah, probably sort of toss them down in amongst the sawdust at the Stanford Hotel.
And I'll put the Club X or Stanford, whatever it is, and I'll rattle the line off or something like that. You want some more alcohol with that?
Yeah. I wonder how I should go with Bacardi anyway. Speaking of which, this program has been brought to you by Bacardi. There you go. So there you go. That's it. Anyway, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up, everybody. We've overstayed our welcome, and as I say, how are we going to miss you if you won't go away? Now, speaking of going away, this week there'll be this week we've got. Coming up, our guest was Chris Harwood from the Victorian Hill Climb Championship, April 24th, the Sunday before for Anzac Day, of course, at Bryant Park. There's the next round of the Victorian Hill Climb Championship. Apparently, very big turnout of cars there. Great fun hill climb. We talk all about hill climb, and we have a special guest. If you saw us recording the program live on Facebook, you'll see what was. Doc wasn't there, but we did have a stand-in and a very.
Did you rub the urn and a trophy? I turned into a trophy. Did you?
Turned into a trophy.
Yeah, so it was into a trophy.
So fabulous! So fabulous! So thanks to Chris.
Turned into a motel, yeah.
Yes, yes.
What's that?
Richard.
Yeah, a very old joke. We won't repeat it. Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As I said, coming up there now, and the week after. We will have, normally we have it Easter Tuesday, but because of the whole thing with 31, the week after, April the 26th, the day after Anzac Day, will be our annual Phillip Island Historic Special. We've got lots of interviews. Doc and I were down there for the weekend. We got all sorts of interviews. We've got some stuff about the book with Murray Carter's life. We've got a great interview there. We've got, we talk about the Ferrari F1. We've got a whole bunch of interviews, a whole bunch of action, and basically, apart from the 180 hours of editing I've got to put in over the next couple of days, that's all we've got time for this week on the program. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. Remember, if you want to listen to the program, we are on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify and all those sorts of things. Otherwise, please join us back here next week live on Thursday night at around 9 o'clock, and also be tuned in. Be tuned in and keep watching In Pit Lane on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. So thanks for joining. We'll see you later. Like and subscribe, as they say, and we'll see you next week. Until then, from all of us, goodbye.
Have a great Easter.